we need to rip the 1x10. And cut it into 2 lengths that we're going to be needing. And we'll save the piece left over from the ripping. That'll make our tool spacer blocks for our chisels. Then we need to take the template, trace the ends of the toolbox on the one piece. Well, you don't need to really cut 2 individual pieces here. We can leave this piece whole and just flip the template for the other side. Once you have that done, we'll cut it out. But before we cut it out, what we need to do is mark the center of our piece. And this will indicate the center of the handle. It's easier to do now before you cut it out, because once it's cut out, then you will have to measure from the bottom of each piece to find the center. Using a straight edge, we'll just make a line down and mark this center point for the handle, lining up the 2 marks, drawing a line down just far enough for the handle. Don't have to mark all the way down. Now go ahead and cut it out with the saber saw. Following your line all the way around. And this is what your pieces should look like. You should have 2 pieces, one for either end. You can see the center mark there. Now we're checking the dimension on the handle, making sure that we follow the directions. There's the dimensions that we need. You could see earlier the dimensions that we had from the piece. So we have to make sure that we have the right width by ripping it down. Now going off the center of the end piece, we're going to measure over half the thickness of the handle. And that will establish our point that we can trace the handle out on. Here it's better if we just use these marks for reference points and take the actual piece of wood and center it on our marks so that we line up and actually trace the handle itself out. This will assure a good fit. Here he's lining it up. It's important here that you use a sharp pencil. You don't want a real fat line. And that's what it should look like. We need to do this to both ends. From here we'll use our bench clamp, clamp our wood down, and we'll cut this notch for the handle out of the ends using the saber saw. There you can see the layout of the handle in the end. The easiest way to cut this out is to run your blade on the inside edge of your mark and run it all the way down. You can run it on both sides all the way down right away, or just on the one side run it down, come up about halfway, and then make your radius and go to the other side. Trimming it up, taking just a little bit at a time, not taking it all in one chunk. Now you'll run it down that side. This will allow you to open up the piece and be able to trim the inside edge on the bottom there. Now you can run it back and finish it up for the other side. You don't have that big hunk of wood in your way, causing the blade to bind. Trim it up as necessary. You may have to do a little fine trimming. Flatten it out. This is what your end should look like. Should have that notch in for the handle for both ends. You can check your handle to make sure that you have a nice snug fit. Now our next step is to lay the handle out using the dimensions on their directions, following both directions for our radius. And then we have to worry about the thickness of the handle also. From our radius to radius, the thickness of the handle will be different than the total thickness of the handle. Measuring in from both sides. Our marks on that end. Using a combination square, using it to square up both ends, and also you can use it for the set depth that you're going to be setting your cutout of your radius, and you use it acting as a straight edge, securing your piece so that it doesn't move on you. Holding the combination square with one hand and penciling the other and just running it along the piece. Our next step now will be to make the radius on the inside of that mark there. One way is to use a quarter. A quarter is exactly an inch in diameter, which will make the half-inch radius. A washer will work. Anything with 1 inch diameter will work here. Another way is also to use the pencil scriber. One of our many tools we will be needing or should have in our carpenter's toolbox. Here he's setting it half-inch. Now he's going to set it for the distance away from this line and then turn the radius. Now we're ready to cut that out. Here we're going to use some relief cuts to make into the radius to take some of the blade binding away. All we do here is we're going to run in the saber saw about halfway on the radius, just at an angle. Don't run the blade past the line. Run it up to the line, and then you can start to make the cut. And there's our relief cut. That'll reduce the blade friction on the wood and allow a little better cutting. The little piece of wood will fall out. There you saw the one piece fall out. Now you can make the rest of the radius to the straight line. Doesn't hurt to use more relief cuts. You can have as many as up to 3, 4, whatever you feel is necessary to make the cut without blade binding. Here we're going to use 2. Cutting up, now he's going to cut the radius. There goes the first piece. There goes the second piece, and he's already almost through the radius. The more cuts, the easier the cutting. Now we need to just rip down the line. You don't want to force it here. The more you force the saw, the more the saw is going to travel with the grain. You want to cut it as straight as possible. This is our handle cut out. At this point, we're going to do step 3, putting on the ends of the toolbox to the bottom. We need to use glue, and the right size fastener is indicated on the directions. Here he's blunting the head of the nail, which will help in not splitting the wood. Allows the nail to plow through it instead of drive through it. Takes away the sharp point. Lessens the chance of the wood splitting. Making sure that our ends are all flush on the bottom and on the sides. Also too, we're not going to hammer down and try to countersink the nails with our hammer. We're going to use a nail set. Want to be careful you don't damage the wood, the head of the hammer. It's important to watch where you're pounding so you're not into knots. Driving a nail into a knot's either going to send the nail on the outside of the wood or it's going to split your wood. Here we're using the set to set the nails. Wipe off all your excess glue, and this is what your toolbox will look like. Step 4, we need to cut our plywood pieces so that we can make our sides and our tool spacer and the level holder. Start from our full piece, and these are the pieces we should have. Now we need to lay out the hand holes. That'll be on one of the pieces. Measuring in from where the direction showed us. measuring both sides. Combination square works well here with the pencil scriber or a quarter. Cut those out. This is what it should look like. Next step is cutting the tool spacers. And getting the side for the level holder on. Again, using glue and the proper fasteners for holding the plywood to the pine. And again, setting your nails as you go. It's a lot easier to set your nails at this point than it is to wait until it's all put together. Putting the ends of the level holder on. And then fastening the level holder to the one side. Laying everything out. Here he's drawing a line, making sure it's always put on the same way. It's also important here to notice your finished side and your rough side. Rough sides are going to be all to the inside of the toolbox. We have one finished side of the plywood and one rough side. Here he's setting the combination square for the height where he's going to put in his screws to hold on to the level holder. And again, gluing everything. Lining everything up. And fastening the tool box side to the level holder. Making sure everything is nice and flush before he puts the first screw in. You want to countersink those screws just a little bit. You don't want to sink them all the way through it. You just want to make them so they're just a little beyond flush. And this is what your holder should look like. At this point we're ready to fasten it to the toolbox bottom and ends. Putting it on and fastening it with the right fasteners. Using a clamp here, you had to pull in the sides, lines up your sides with your level holder, and pre-drilling this hole for the fastener needed to hold that at the top. Using an 8D nail there, finish nail. Driving it in. Okay, at this point we're going to do step 6. We need to make the tool holder blocks and fasten this all together. We need to have an instructor help you with that, and this is what your block should look like. Laying everything out, he's putting a block on both ends. Using the little brad nails to put these on, and a brad pusher. It's a lot easier with the brad pusher than it is to try to pound these in. You just force this down. Point of the nail, line it up, push it down. Nail sticks up, finish it off with your hammer. Again, lining everything up, pushing it down. Cutting yourself a block here for a spacer of 5/8 wide, which he has laying on the table there. That's what he's going to use for the spacing in between the blocks. Just lays that in there and pushes up the spacer blocks to it. And this is what the finished should look like. Now step 7. We need to fasten it to our other side. This is what we have now. This is what we need to put it on. Putting our other side on and marking it, this is where he has to put the 2 end spacer blocks and fasten them too. We can also measure it. That'll work. This is one form, measuring would be another. If you want, you can add more blocks. We just require that you have these 4 spaces for your chisels. We can have more blocks though. The directions only require these 6 to be on there. Okay, he's lining everything up according to the lines he drew. Very carefully, he's tipping it over, checking, making sure it didn't move. And fastening the one corner. Okay, once you get it all fastened, it should look like this. Remember to set your nails right away, especially on this piece. It's better to set them as you go. should fit snug in there. Line it up, he was checking his fit. Now the finish step would be to just glue it and fasten it on. This should be what it looks like when it's all fastened in. Now we're ready to go on to the next step. All the nails are set. Next step, we need to router our handle. Getting a router pad, getting the right router with the right bit. We want a rounding over bit. All we require is that you router the inside radius, both sides. If you want to do the top, you can. And then carefully put the handle into place. These are the fasteners we'll be using. Now your handle should fit somewhat snug. Shouldn't be tight, but should be snug. You don't want it too loose either. Okay, the handle fits nice. We're going to take it out and use a little glue. Put our handle back in place. Flushing up the ends. It's important that when we fasten the handle in place, that we pre-drill holes for our fasteners. You want to be careful. You want to drill one on one side and stagger it, offset it so that they don't hit each other when you're fastening them from both sides. You don't want to hit the nail that you put on the other side. So you want to go towards the inside of the toolbox on one side and to the outside of the toolbox on the other. You'll do this on both ends. When putting nails into wood too, if you have some wax, wax works real well. Helps the nail go in a little easier without a lot of force. Taking a block plane and taking off the very sharp edge of the top part. Not a lot here, we just want to shave it. Round it just a little bit. Last step, number 11. We need to sand it and take the toolbox to an instructor for evaluation. It's all sanded and complete. This is what your toolbox should look like. 4 spacers, and that's the end of the toolbox project.